Okay, we'll give everybody another minute to log in here before we get started. All right, let's go ahead and kick it off. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Cyrusson webinar on increasing flexibility and efficiency with SCSM using automation. I'm Billy Wilson, a solutions architect with Cyrusson. A couple of housekeeping items real quick as usual. This is a non-interactive webinar, so if you have questions, please post them in the question space in your GoToMeeting applet, and I'll address those at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. If I can't answer your question immediately or we run out of time, my email address is right up here on the screen, so go ahead and take note of that, and you can email me and I can follow up with you. I am recording this webinar, and it will be available out on our Team Cyrusson Vimeo site, hopefully today, but if not, in the next day or two. So let's take a look at the agenda for today. I'm going to go through the obligatory who we are. A lot of you on the call probably already know, but there are some that don't. So I'll briefly touch on Cyrusson. We'll talk about automation and a couple of questions to get started on automation. And, just to let you know, this is kind of geared toward those who are really starting out in automation and just don't really know where to go. That being said, I'm pretty sure we're going to have some people on this webinar that are very skilled in automation, and I hope you find value out of this as well. So we'll talk about why to automate. We'll talk about when to automate. We'll talk about how to automate, and then we'll get into the demo. And I'm going to try to get through the slideshow pretty quickly so we can have plenty of time for the demo. So I have 3 basic examples that I'm setting up for the demo. Onboarding steps using the Cyrusson PowerShell activity for automation, and then the other 2 will be using Orchestrator, and one is showing you a dynamic approval process, and the other is showing you accountability on manual activities, and I'll explain that in a few minutes on what that's supposed to be. After that, show you a couple of options for next steps, and then we'll have the Q&A. So a little bit about Cyrusson. We're headquartered in San Diego with employees across the United States and Europe and APAC regions. We have over 1,200 customers in 65 countries and well over 43,000 consulting hours, and an awesome renewal rate, which just shows how much our clients really stick with us. At the bottom, you see a few of our accolades like Inc. 500 and so on and so forth. And if you want to read more about that, you can go to our website at cyrusson.com. A couple of our fans are customers, and you can see that Cyrusson's pretty much in every type of industry because IT service management is pretty much in every type of industry. So we have clients obviously in information technology, but also in finance and energy, healthcare, and government at local, city, state, Fed, Gov level, all of them. So let's talk about automation, and let's start out with why you should automate. So with ITSM in general, there's usually a lot to do. There can be several processes going on for each service catalog item that you provide as a department, and sometimes in sequence and sometimes in parallel work streams. Doing each step manually takes time and sometimes can produce slightly different results on any given day. So identifying which steps in your process that you can automate can provide you with some advantages that may seem like small wins taken individually, but collectively can add up to some significant returns. Automating can increase efficiency in your processes, as what may take minutes or hours to do manually can actually be reduced to seconds by automating. Automation can also provide consistency in that certain steps can be ensured to be performed the same way every time. And sometimes you have processes and steps in processes that you really need that to happen. Can also increase flexibility, allowing ITSM processes to be more adaptable to business processes. My history, I come from an oil and gas project engineering company where I was a service manager admin, and I used Orchestrator, and I did a lot of processing and automation and stuff like that. And I had to bring in a lot of flexible automation in because processes were never the same from one department or one project to the other. So I had to have some flexibility there. And over time, adding efficiency and consistency to your process will provide you value where your analysts are a little more freed up to focus their time on more important matters. And you always got to remember, time is money. So that's always been my credo. So a bit about when to automate. In organizations that I've worked with, I've seen many times where once a step or two in a process is automated, the urge is to automate everything. Even service manager admins, once we get a taste of what can be done, we have a tendency to just go nuts. However, as with most things, there's kind of a time and a place for automation, right? So when you're reviewing your IT service management processes to look for automation opportunities, might want to keep a couple of things in mind. Look for steps that are repetitive, things that have to happen the same way each time they are done. So automating those can help ensure consistency. Look for steps that are more or less static. It's true you can automate more dynamic steps, and I'm actually going to show you that in the demo today. But the less dynamic they are, it's easier to hang the automation tag on them and say this one can be automated. Look for steps that happen frequently. Doesn't make sense to automate a step or a process that happens once a quarter and takes about 5 minutes to complete. You know, there's got to be some ROI there when you're picking out things to automate. And look for steps that have a tendency to be neglected. If you're getting feedback from your users that services are not being rendered properly and you find out that certain steps are consistently being skipped, see if they can be automated. Now, that being said, and I'm actually going to, one of the demo pieces is going to kind of speak to that a little bit, but that being said, if you're a manager, please try to refrain from constantly expecting automation to provide you with a technical solution to a management problem. I got that a lot back when I was automating and back when I was a service manager administrator. Automation is actually supposed to allow your analysts to be more productive, but you know, try to avoid the tendency to give them a reason to be lazy. You know what I'm saying? All of this is designed to bring value, again, money, to your IT service management and by extension, your business. And finally, how to automate with Service Manager, since that's the focus of this webinar for today. So what are some of the ways you can automate processes within Service Manager? Firstly, you can do some automation directly from within Service Manager itself out of the box. By using event workflows and notification subscriptions, you can do some basic automation just right away without really having to go any deeper technically. Service Manager also comes with an authoring tool that you can use to build workflow management packs. But I'm going to kind of warn you, it's a bit more complicated and can also tax the workflow server if you're not careful. So study up, learn about what kind of workflows you can build through the authoring tool or through the Visual Studio add-in for Service Manager before you tackle something like this. In the System Center suite, Microsoft also added Orchestrator, an automation engine with a designer that can integrate with just about anything, especially all of the System Center apps, such as Service Manager, ConfigMan, SCOM, et cetera, et cetera. This is typically the go-to solution, and it was for me for more complex and dynamic workflow automation. And two of my demo examples are going to be using Orchestrator. So we'll see what those look like in a few minutes. At Cyerson, we also provide a couple of automation helpers, such as the PowerShell activity, which is an activity work item class like manual activity or review activity that you can drop in your workflow, but it allows you to execute PowerShell code directly from the service request, change request, or whatever work item type workflow that you're using. And that's also going to be one of my examples that I'm going to show you today. At Cyerson, we also provide an SMA connector to allow you to integrate SMA runbooks within Service Manager. Now, I don't have an example of that one to show you today, but you can check out our website for more details on that solution. And also, we have another website called community.cyerson.com, where we have a lot of people on that community website that are a lot smarter than me, and they do actually use SMA. So hit them up for some examples of how you can use SMA to automate your processes within Service Manager. Okay, so that went pretty quickly. Let's swing over to the demo. We're going to take a look at a few basic examples for how to provide a bit of flexibility and efficiency to Service Manager using automation. The first example will be adding automation into an onboarding process using the PowerShell activity. Next, we'll be adding approval flexibility in review activities in a software request using Orchestrator. And then finally, I'll show you how to ensure manual activities are accounted for also by using Orchestrator. Now, here I'm going to let you know that at some point, either today, this week, I am going to package up all of this and post it somewhere for the people on this call to be able to download if you want these examples that I'm using to get started. And I'll write up some documentation on it and stuff like that, so you'll be able to understand it and adapt it to your environment if that's something that you think is a good example for you to use in your environment. So that being said, let me drop this down and pull up our my lab environment. So like I said, we're going to start off with the PowerShell script in the onboarding piece. So PowerShell script is something that Cyerson developed. It's a type of activity to be able to run directly from within your workflows. So how it's set up is once you've installed it into the console, you come in here to your library and you have your PowerShell script. So I'm going to look at my published PowerShell scripts. And the two that I'm going to be using today are for portal onboarding. So creating an AD user and adding a user to the Active Directory group. So let's take a look at what this looks like. So I take my PowerShell script and then I add the script in here. And this is the script. And I want to take this opportunity to give a shout out to one of my coworkers, Justin Workman, for helping me get this script really tuned up and tightened up. Most of it is his, because I had some questions and he had answers, which is really cool. So the way the script works is we have a parameter that we're passing in. And what we're passing in is the actual user input from the service request work item. Now, those of you that are familiar with service requests and request offerings, you know that the user import in an actual record is actually an XML format. So what this PowerShell script does is pulls in the XML user input, then looks at the questions that I want to find the answers for, pulls out the answer values in that XML, and then I'm able to use that to pass in to actually create my Active Directory user. Now, one of the really cool things that Justin helped me out with was the fact that anybody that's seen, and what I'll do is I'll jump back over here. Anybody that has seen a service request, and I'll pull up, this one. Knows that if you're using a query results in your questions, the query results value itself is still in XML format. This is something that is native to Service Manager. Never quite figured out why that is, but it is what it is, so it's something we have to deal with. So within the script, I'm going to close this, we're able to actually parse down through that to get the information that we really need, the value that we need to be able to pass through. So this is the one to actually create the Active Directory user. And I'll cancel that, jump back over here to library. And then after I create the Active Directory user, I'm going to add it to the groups that are selected from within the request offering. So this is the script that actually does that. Now you can probably do all of this in one script if you want to. Again, there are going to be people on this call that are going to look at what I've done and go, I know a better way to do that. And that's awesome. So, and don't be shy about spreading that information around, especially in the community website. So I'm just kind of going off what I've learned thus far. But so there are different ways you can do it, but this is the way I've done it. So what that's going to do is do the same thing, parse the user input and add it in. So how that works is once you've created your PowerShell script and published it, you go into your templates, and then you create your PowerShell script template and add it to the actual work item. So I'm going to go into my onboarding demo template, service request. And you're going to see that in my activities, my first activity, of course, is a review activity, so I can get approval for this request. Then my next activity is the actual create Active Directory user. And so I've set up my information here, my area and stage, and I like to set these for reporting purposes to make sure I'm keeping on top of this. And if you come into the PowerShell script, you're able to select the PowerShell script that you created. It will show you the actual script in the window, and then down here you map to the user input property. So in my case, that's what I do. Another thing that some people do is they may map to the actual ID of the service request, or however you want to do it, but that's how it's set up. So cancel that. So once it goes through the review activity, it'll create the Active Directory user, then it'll add the user to the groups, and then it'll continue with my normal onboarding process, which I have a bunch of stuff here. But we're not going to go through all this stuff in the demo in the interest of time. So let's cancel this and let's see if it works. By the way, all this worked. All of my examples here worked about an hour ago. So if they don't work now, I blame you. So let's give it a try. We're going to log in to the portal. I'm going to go to my home page. I'm going to go to my request offering, onboarding, my demo version, and I'm going to put my first name, no middle initial, last name, my title. I'm going to make it an accountant. I am going to select the finance group for his department, his manager. I'm going to select that. Employee type, he's a full-time employee. He's going to be in Houston. Start date is going to be 4th. Click next. Standard IT package or a la carte. I'm going to pick standard IT package and finance in the interest of time. Access groups, so he's going to be a member of accounts payable and accounts receivable. Enter additional information. I'm just going to put some gibberish. Click save. And now the SR is going to be created. So here's James Harden. We're going to go ahead and wait. Right now it's in progress, so that's good. That means we're going to wait until my review activity comes into pending so I can approve it. I have to give it just a minute. There we go. So we're going to go in progress. I can approve it. Click approve. No, I don't have any comments. Go ahead and apply. So that's going to move it to the next level. So we're going to take a minute to let these go through pending to in progress to completed. And in my earlier trials, it really didn't take that long. So hopefully we get the same results this time. Oh, I forgot to mention as part of the activity, it's going to create the user, set the username, set the password, set the manager, and the description being the title of the user, and also, again, add the user to the groups. Okay, so the first one's kicking off. Again, all of this is running on my workflow server. So one of the things that I kind of want to caution people about with the where the PowerShell activity is concerned, all of the PowerShell is run at this time on the workflow server itself, the Service Manager Management Server Workflow Server, which is obviously the first management server that you built. Now, if you have a large environment or if you have a high ticket volume, then you may want to restrict the PowerShell activity for very simplistic uses. Anything more complex, you're probably going to want to go to Orchestrator or something else, because you do not want to overtax the workflow server, because unfortunately they can't be load balanced. So just take that as kind of a cautionary tale. Okay, that one's completed. So now this one's kicking off. Okay, that one's completed. Good. So now we're going to go to Active Directory. You're going to see I'm in the finance group right now, and I don't have James Harden in here. So I'm going to do a refresh. And there's James. He's an accountant. His manager is Harry. And if I go member of, he's in accounts payable and accounts receivable now. So that's just a simple way to do some automation. Something like that before usually was a manual activity that had to be assigned to somebody. Somebody had to have the access to Active Directory to actually create this user and then set all those attributes. And you can set up, whatever attributes that you need to set up based on your processes. In my script, I set it up to be first name dot last name is the username, which is the standard for a lot of people, but it's not always the case. Sometimes it's first initial last name and different types of naming conventions. So you may have to get a little more creative in order to do that, but the capability is there, which is what we really wanted to demonstrate. Okay, so we're 1 for 3. That's pretty cool thus far. Let's jump over to my orchestrator server. So what we're going to do this time is dynamic approval step. So the way this works is I have a run book. Let me pull this over a little bit. That as part of a software request, the first template in there is, or the first activity in there is the runbook automation activity. And then what that's going to do is that's going to go in and get the review activity, and based on the choices that I make for location and the software I select in the request offering, it's going to determine who to add as the approver. Because a lot of times, I mean, it's awesome when you can statically add approvers into your templates, but a lot of time that's just not an option. And the way I do it, and this is what I did, there are different ways you can do this. You can do it with PowerShell, or you can do it as configuration items within Service Manager. The way I did it back then and the way I did it now is I created in my SQL instance for Orchestrator, I created a database called SCO, System Center Orchestrator Utility, and I created a table called Software Approval. And the reason I did this before and the reason I did it this time is, you know, if you do it as a configuration item, you have to be very careful about who you allow to have access, because somebody can add themselves in as an approver as part of a process if you're not careful. Here with SQL, the only person I have to worry about other than myself is SQL admins or whoever else has access to the database. So what I've done is I've created just a simple table that gives me the software name, the software object GUID, and the approver name and approver object GUID. I added a column for approver level in case I have tiered approvals. That way I can go, if it's level 0, if it's at level 1, is it level 2, if I have more than one approval level. The department and the department object GUID, and the location and the location object GUID. And obviously you want to make sure you have the object GUIDs for everything, so you can immediately be able to pull information through Orchestrator, because without having to go to that object and figure out the object GUID based on the display name. So I can add this here. So the way I have it set out is for Visual Studio 2018, if you are in Houston, Texas, Chad is going to be your approver. If you're in London, England, then Brent is going to be your approver, just for Visual Studio 2018. Okay, so let's look at the runbook. And the way I set up my runbooks, if I am going to initiate a runbook from a runbook automation activity in Service Manager, my standard modus operandi is to create a folder called SCSM Sync, and then I create a folder for each request offering that's going to utilize the runbook activity. And in here, all I do is have one runbook that passes in information from the runbook automation activity, then passes it in to the actual runbook that does all the work down here. And the reason I do that is because, you know, those of you familiar with how runbook activities work within Service Manager, anytime you make a change to a runbook that is synchronized with Service Manager, you have to update the runbook in Service Manager. You have to rerun the connector. And a lot of times you have to clear the cache on truncate the table on the database to make sure it updates correctly, which after a while is going to get to be a pain. So here, if I create a runbook that simply calls another runbook, I'll never have to update this. And anytime I have to update this runbook, as long as the data that I'm passing in doesn't change, which it usually doesn't by the way I build them, then I can update this as many times as I want, and I won't have to resync, because it's not being synchronized to Service Manager. The one that calls this one is. So that's just a kind of a tip that I use. So the way we do it here is we initialize data, and what I'm passing in is the runbook automation activity ID. From there, I do a get object to bring the runbook information in. I get the related service request to that runbook. I do a get object to, and all of this is from the Service Manager integration pack. I do the get object to get the Service Manager information, or service request information, excuse me. I get the affected user, and then of course you have to do a filter to make sure that the relation class is correct to get the information about the affected user. Because one of the things that I do is update the review activity to say who is actually asking for this. I get the related review activity. I use an XML activity to pull the user input. And you do this by using the XPath query to actually get the question. And then you use another one to actually determine whether or not you want the display name, because with a question that has a query results like a configuration item, like an Active Directory user or anything like that, you're going to actually get two values in each one. One is the display name of the object, and the other is the object GUID, the GUID of the object. So you need to determine whether or not you want to bring back the display name to use down the line in your runbook, or you want to bring in the ID. For my purposes, I'm bringing in the ID. So, and I get the related software asset. I get the information on the software asset. Right here, I update the review activity to change the title, and all I do is just add in the name of the affected user. So that way the reviewer can see who actually asked for it without having to click up one. Then I go into a map published data, and this is from the utilities pack. And the reason I do that is I map in a pattern to an actual variable that I create. And basically what I'm saying here is if they selected Visual Studio 2018, make the variable reg SW MGR. And I can do that if the way I set up this runbook is just for the purposes of this demo is if it's Visual Studio they're asking for, they need the specific approver from the database. If it's anything else, use your direct line manager. Set up the review activity to be the direct line manager, right? And what I could have done is maybe some of the apps don't need approval at all. So for the direct line manager approval ones, I would have set up their names in here and mapped it to direct line manager. And so the reason I do all this is then from here with the filter from the link, I can say if the approval type is reg SW manager, then take this path. If it's not, then take the direct manager path. So what happens here is I get a check SQL and do a select statement to pull my information based on the location ID. I create the reviewer for the review activity, relate it, the approver, the Active Directory person from this by using the GUID. You can see here, this is how you parse the field that comes from the SQL. And then something I do, and this is, you might find value in this or something like that. I used heavily in my former job, the Action Log Notify app from Cyrison. Now that's been rolled up into the Notify Analyst, but so I still use it. But one of the reasons I found it very effective is when I had a complex workflow where there's several different activities that are having to be done, having to be completed to complete the service for whatever reason, like onboarding or software requests or something like that. Every time something was completed, I used these two items right here to update, to add an analyst comment to the actual service request, letting them know something got done and something next is coming up. And that way, the Action Log Notify would email the affected user, and the affected user would know that one step was completed and another step is gone. For the purposes of this one, you have to generate a GUID for the comment, but I add an analyst comment that says a request for approval has been sent to the person who's going to approve the request. And the reason I did that is that way, whoever is approving this request, the end user knows who the approver is going to be. So instead of calling service desk and going, hey, what's up? Why hasn't this been approved? They know who the approver is. They can go to that person and go, hey, what's up? Why haven't you approved my request? So just something that makes it a little easier. And then I throw in an update activity to actually create the runbook automation or complete the set the runbook automation activity to completed now instead of waiting for the workflow within Service Manager to complete it, mainly just because I like it to be more efficient. Again, if it goes down the direct manager path, all it does is update line manager should review to true, and then it adds the analyst comment, and then we're done. One of the cool things, just looking at it now, that I probably could have done is I could have set my template to line manager by default and just had pulled this up here before this happened and turned it from true to false, and then I wouldn't even really need this path. It's just something to think about. But again, you know, the more you do these, the more different ways you're going to think to be able to do them. So now, a lot of you on the call, or some of you on the call that do this a lot, are going to go, yeah, that looks really complex, Billy. What I would have done is I would have had an initiate data, I would have had a run a .NET script, and I would have done the whole thing in one PowerShell. That's totally awesome. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. A lot of the people that I've worked with do it that way. It's what you feel most comfortable with, to be honest with you. You don't have to do everything. So they're different acolytes for different styles, but hey, you know, whatever works is my motto. So let's try this out. Let's see if it works. So I'm going to log in. I'm going to go to my software request. And then I'm going to pick Visual Studio. And I'm going to pick Houston as my location. I'm just going to put gibberish in as a justification. Then I'm going to click Save. And then while that's saving, I'm going to show you. Actually, let's refresh here. So here's the Visual Studio. So showing you what the template looks like. So I have the runbook automation, I have the review activity, and then I have manual activities, one to assign the software license and one to actually deploy the software. And I could have automated the deployment using configman as well, an orchestrator or PowerShell. But for my immediate purposes, this is what I did. So here, let's jump into here. We have our software request. So when this kicks off, it's going to call this one. And it just kicked off. So now you can see that this is running. And then we'll check out our log history when it's done. It usually doesn't take that long. Okay, so we can see that there's a success here. So let's take a look at it. So it ran through all of these things. You can see after the map publish data, it took the get regional software manager approver path and then completed all of that stuff. So let's see what it looks like now. So I'm going to come in here to my requests. And I'm going to go to activities. I'm going to go to my review activity. You can see that I added my name to the title. And that Chad is a reviewer. So because Chad was the reviewer for Houston. The other thing you're going to see if I jump back to general is in my action logs, I have an analyst comment that is not marked as private. So it will go out, go out in an email notification saying a request for approval has been sent to Chad House. So now as an end user, I've got an email saying, hey, we got your request and approval has been sent to Chad House. So I know that Chad is the one that's got to approve this request. So let's do that again, except let's go to the UK. So I'm going to jump in here to request software. I'm going to pick Visual Studio. I'm going to pick the UK this time. Click Save. Okay, that's created. So let's jump over to our runbook. Wait for that to kick off. May take about a minute. One of the other things you're going to notice is I don't have a lot of the what you would call the standard naming convention for runbooks and runbook tables, the versioning numbers and stuff like that. It's because it's my lab. I didn't really want to get into all that kind of formality, but it really is a good best practice to version these. Another best practice, and this is done now, you can see it come through. Another best practice under configure is to prompt for comment on check-in. So every time you check out and make a change, you have a database record of what change you made. So if you ever have to go back and find out what's going on, you have that capability. So there's some audit trail. So it's highly recommended that you do that. So I'm going to open this up. Again, you can see that after the map published data, it went the get regional software manager approver route. So let's jump back up to my request. Scroll down. There's my analyst comment. Now it can say the request for approval has been sent to Brent. And if I jump into my activities, I can see that now Brent is the actual approver. So, all right. So now let's do this one more time. What am I doing? Jump back up here. This time we're going to pick a different app. So let's pick Adobe. Houston. Justification. Information. Save. Okay, so let's see it kick off this time. And if I did it right, it'll take the bottom path and just simply check the box for line manager. And again, just to reiterate, the two runbooks that I show you, and the PowerShell script that I used in the first example, scripts, I should say, that I used in the first example, and a write-up documentation about how all this is used. I'll get all that together and make it available and put it somewhere where you guys can download it. Either they will send out, marketing will send out an email with a link to where you can get it from, or I'll put it on the community, something like that. I'll work that out with our marketing department on what's best. And if you want, I'll include the deck as well, slide deck. So it ran. So now we can see after the map published data, we did go the line manager route. So let's jump back up here to Adobe Acrobat. Go to our action log. A request for approval has been sent to your direct manager. Activities, view activity. Oh, it's still in progress. Oh no, it's in progress, it's supposed to be. Let me do a refresh. There we go. So my direct activity has been added. Line manager should review. So there you go. That's the dynamic approver. So that's one of the ways that you can do that. So now, with 15 minutes left to go, let's look at the third activity. So I'm going to use the same one. Let's jump back to my requests. The third runbook that I did is what is called a monitor runbook. So you have the ability to have runbooks kick off using a runbook automation activity from within Service Manager, but you also have the ability to monitor work items or configuration items directly on a schedule. And from there, if a certain condition is met, then the runbook kicks off. And that's what I did for this one. So with this one, and this one right here is something I did in my former company too. We had a huge problem with analysts completing manual activities for their part of whatever workflow, onboarding, software requests, hardware requests, so on and so forth, without putting themselves as the activity implementer, which made reporting a flippin' nightmare. So one of the things that I did is I created this monitor to look whenever a manual activity goes into completed state, it goes in and looks to see if there is an assigned to user as a part of that manual activity. And if not, what it does is it runs this .NET script, this PowerShell script, gets the name of the person who completed it from the history log, and then adds them as the assigned to user. So I don't have to worry about that anymore. If somebody just goes in and grabs and completes a manual activity, it's going to assign it to them. All right. So let's just use the last software request. Now, I can't, one of the things you're going to notice, and this is a customization that a lot of our clients have, and if you don't have, look for the community site to get it. But I have a customization in my portal to where, unlike the console, if I'm not the approver, I can't approve it. So for our purposes, I'm going to jump in here in the console because I'm logged in as myself, and just open this one up. Go to the activities, go to the review activity. I'm going to approve on behalf of Tony. Click OK. Click Apply. Or just click OK. Actually, you know what? I'll just stay in here. So once this one goes into in progress, okay, so now that this is in progress, so, and I could have just done it from here, but I'm just gonna mark as completed, put a comment in, click OK, click Apply. And so that's now completed. So let's go jump over to our Runbook. I think if I remember correctly, I have this thing set to run every 10 seconds. So you're gonna notice that instead of all of this here being in the same Runbook, I have this actually call this Runbook first. Those that are not that familiar with the Orchestrator, the reason I do that is because within 10 seconds, if I have a large ticket volume, I could have 4 or 5 manual activities that meet this criteria. And if I did all of this here, they would all try to do it at the same time, which causes errors. Here, if I go to this one, if I set this Runbook up as wait for completion, it forces it to go through each one at a time. So if I jump over here, you can see that this one is completed, that it checked for assigned user, got the completed by user and date, get user, relate to assigned user. Here's the interesting thing. I have this filter here that looks to see if it exists, assigned user exists, actually serves 2 purposes, not just one. Not only does it serve the purpose to make sure that an assigned to user doesn't already exist, but it also keeps this from happening redundantly. And the reason that would happen, and you can see it did happen, is this. When you do a monitor activity within Service Manager, it is going to look for every time a whatever class of work item that you're doing is updated, meeting this criteria. Now, what that does, a lot of people get a little confused. That doesn't mean that it only fires if the status is changed to completed. That's not the case. What happens is it fires every time that activity is updated and the status equals completed. So one of the things that you're going to realize is things happen to these work items through automation, through the work service manager workflow, everything like that, even after you've set it to completed. So what can happen is it'll fire more than once, because the simple act of me adding the assigned to user actually updates the activity. So this will run again, see that it's updated again, and run it a second time. So you're going to see these subsequent times that it ran through the same thing, but this time, because there was an assigned to user already assigned, it just simply died there. So nothing else happens redundantly. So if we go look at the actual work item, I'm going to do a refresh. You can see that I've been added as the activity implementer. So it worked as desired, right? But if we go into the history, you're going to see that, yes, so here I completed it, which was updating the activity once. Then I actually assigned the user, which updated the activity again. Then it automatically made the first assigned date. And I could probably turn that off, but again, it updated the activity a third time. So each time it updates, it's going to run that runbook again, which is why I have that filter in there. So be cognizant of that when you do your runbooks. So that's it for the demo side. Let me pull up my PowerPoint again. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up, this is kind of a next steps type of thing, is that, as most of you know, Cybersyn has consulting. And one of the things that we're doing with this webinar, the people that are attending this webinar, is we're actually going to offer you a free 30-minute automation consultation with our System Center consulting experts. So if that's something that would interest you, you could take those 30 minutes to have our consultant give you the basics on automation. You can have them look at any automation you already have and kind of check it over. However you want to use that 30 minutes from an automation standpoint, all you got to do is email team@cybersyn.com and schedule that for you. Again, another great resource is community website, community.cybersyn.com, to be able to look at information about automation from there. And of course, if you have some complex automation that you really want to do, you know what you want, but you're not sure how to do it, you can call us up, we can scope it out for you, and we can help you with that as well. So with that, I'm going to take it to the Q&A and open the floor for questions. And immediately we have a question: when is the video posted, and will the PowerShell and export will be available? Yes, the video should be posted within a day or two. The other, I'm going to try to have it by the end of the week, Monday probably at the latest. And you'll either get, you'll definitely get an email either letting you know that, sending you a link to download it from, or I'll put it in the community, one or the other. But yeah, it'll definitely all be there. And I'll go ahead and add the slide deck as well. So, and we'll leave it open for a couple more questions if anybody else has questions. I hope this was beneficial to you guys and gals. How much orchestrator automation do I use? Oh man, back when I was a service manager admin, I used it a lot, because we had a lot of request offerings that, you know, from a oil and gas and engineering standpoint, my company was kind of split down two areas. One was engineering, and engineering also included all the administrative level departments, and then we had what was called CAD, the drafting and the design side. So everything had a different, every organization had a different way of doing the same request. So I had to have the flexibility to be able to determine what department you were in, and from there create, set up my process, my workflows directly from there. So that being said, there's actually a couple ways that people do it. One, as far as orchestrator workflows go, one way to do it is to have all of your work items in a template as part of the request offering, and then just update those work items depending on how it goes with the orchestrator. One of the ways I did it is I actually had orchestrator create the work items as it went in sequence. There's a little more risk to that in the fact that, if something happens with the Runbook and it doesn't recover, you can, and you don't set up enough fail-safe, your workflow will simply cut off, and you can't take it away manually. You have to go in and add all the activities manually. But if you don't really have that much of a risk, or if you do take steps to mitigate that risk, the upside is, for me at least, was because the review activity was either the first or the second, depending on the way I did the automation activity in the workflow. If it got rejected, then it was over. No other automation ran, no other work items were created. I didn't have a ton of work items that had to go into canceled mode and clog up my database. So that was kind of one of the ones that I did. I would always recommend kind of experimenting between the two. If your Runbook is run tight enough, and your analysts pay attention to their processes enough to where you can kind of mitigate the risk of having bad data send the automation in a bad path, then I like the idea of only creating work items as they are required, instead of having them sit in a pending state. And that was the other thing. Let's use onboarding for an example. So I automated creating the Active Directory user, but I have to have my asset manager assign the hardware and software and mobile device assets. I have to have desktop support provision the hardware and software or mobile device assets, and deploy the software depending on how I set it up. I also had HR set up their benefits, and I had finance set up their payroll, and all that as part of my process. But so if I do all that in a template, and that's actually how I have it now in my lab, all those tickets got created, so they're sitting in their queues in a pending state. Whereas, so they can see it's pending, but they don't act on it until it goes to in progress, and then you have to make sure that they get the notification that it has gone to in progress. Whereas if you create as you go, do an as you go process on your work items, they don't sit in their queue in a pending state. If they don't show up, then they don't ever have to do anything. Once they do show up, they're automatically in progress, and there you go. They can action them. Their part is gold. They don't have to worry about it again. So just kind of play around with both and see which works best for you. By SCO additions, are you talking about the integration packs for Service Manager? To be able to have those activities? If that's what you're referring to, then no, when you update the SM from Orchestrator. Oh, you mean in the work item itself? Oh, basically at whatever step that needs to happen first. So the reason in the approval workflow, the reason the Runbook automation activity was first is I needed to be able to add an approver before the review activity went into an in-progress state, because it's just a best practice to do that. rather than have it in an in-progress state with no approver and then adding an approver. Now, if you're using the Notify Analyst app, that you can compensate for that. But the reason I did it this way is to make sure that I have all my data and everything set up in the workflow before the review activity goes into an in-progress state. Now, back when I was, again, speaking what I was talking about earlier, back when I was doing an on-demand path for creating work items, basically the way it would work is I would create a runbook automation activity and a review activity initially, and that was all that was in the service request. The runbook automation activity would set up the review activity, and then once the review activity went into in progress, if it got approved, it kicked off, or actually, no, I do a runbook automation activity, the review activity, and then another runbook automation activity. If it got approved, the third runbook or second runbook automation activity would then go through and start creating the next step. And as part of my runbooks, every next step also created the next runbook automation activity. Now, again, you don't have to use runbook automation activities to update your or add to your workflows or anything like that. You can use the monitor activity to do that as well. It all depends on what makes sense for you. So that's how I did it. Does the PowerShell activity run with the rights of the service account? Yes, it runs with the rights of the workflow account. It's a workflow just like anything else. Just the benefit of the PowerShell activity is you don't have to create a management pack for it. You can do on demand with that. But yeah, just like, if you were to create a management pack for a workflow, then, or one of the out of the box workflows, then yeah, it does. They all run under the service account. Got about 1 more minute before we cut it off. Again, if anybody has any questions and we're not able to get to them now, you can email me. Let me know. You can go to the community website, community.cyrison.com. A lot of information there. You can go to our website, cyrison.com, and check out our products. And if you have other questions, you can email our staff from there. And again, I highly recommend take advantage of the free 30-minute consulting that we have. Just email team@cyrison.com and set that up. And we can get you on the road, or we can help you with what you already have going. All right, well, thank you for coming out. I appreciate your time. I hope this was helpful, and I hope everybody has a great week. Thank you very much.